Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you're enjoying your day wherever you are. Welcome to the first episode of Let's Have Renaissance with the Daykeepers. I am Ito Otini
and Makaya Otini.
We are going to be answering the questions that a lot of people have. Do I have a book in me? And if yes, how do I go about writing one? We all have stories, and we all want the world to know who we are and what we have accomplished. We want to leave something behind. And for those of us who want to leave stories behind, this is for you.
A lot of people have stories. And most people don't write them. Most people don't leave them behind in any form. It's not surprising when you think about all the obstacles that people face. I think it was Jane Austen who said, if you have lived to be 15 years old, you have enough material to spend the rest of your life writing books. And when I first heard that quote, I did not respond to it. I didn't resonate with it because I had been forced to repress and deny a lot of the things that I'd experienced. And therefore I wasn't able to acknowledge that they were material that I could draw from in my writing. There are a lot of barriers that readers, people who pick up books and read the final product, never see. We're going to be talking about some of those barriers today, and we're going to be talking about ways to overcome them. And I hope that this will leave listeners feeling a bit less alone.
One of the big barriers is that self-doubt. A lot of people think that their stories are not good enough, even though there is that desire. They want to tell their stories. They want to be acknowledged, celebrated, known, or anything like that. But they think, I personally have met a lot of people who told me, I haven't accomplished enough. And people in their 40s, 50s, and they say, I am still young. I will write my story when I am old, or I will tell my story when I am old. But there is one thing that I personally faced a lot, and that is fear. What would people say about me, and how would people react to what I have to say? But what I have learned is that a lot of people see stories as a lesson. As a teacher, a lot of people see stories as teachers. They want to learn from other people's experiences. Sometimes they also want to relate, and they relate because we're humans, we have a lot in common, and we have things that connect us. We have experiences that are not unique, that are universal. If you are listening to us now, it means you have hopefully lived more than 15 years, which means you have a lot to say, a lot to teach, and a lot to share with the world. It is hard to tell, especially someone's story, as I said earlier, because there are challenges, and sometimes there's a lack of skills. Having a story is not itself enough to write one.
You do need a lot of technical expertise to create a book and put it out into the world. I mean, storytelling in and of itself is a skill, I think, because it is abstract. A lot of people don't consider it a skill. They consider it maybe a talent, or maybe they don't even consider that component of writing because it happens before any words land on the page. But absolutely is a skill, knowing how to put a story together.
I come from an oral tradition culture where we didn't have any way to write or read stories. Our stories were orally told. And I strongly believe that that's the best and the foundation for anyone to tell their story. I did that myself. You go around, you share your story with your friends, and then a small group, and it goes like that. I started by sharing my story with students, high school or middle school students back in Morocco. And then later, of course, sharing it with an international audience and writing a memoir. But if you start telling your story, you will eventually become an expert in your own ability to put it together. And whether you write it on your own or maybe even hire a ghostwriter if you are busy or you don't have skills to write it yourself.
Editing is a skill that you are going to need, either self-editing or hiring an editor, working with an editor. Ideally, you're going to have support from multiple people with editorial expertise so that you can get a variety of perspectives. Let's say that you have a polished manuscript, but you still don't have any, you need a graphic designer, you don't have graphic design skills, or maybe you have a polished manuscript and you have a graphic designer, or you've created a design yourself, but you're still going to need a marketing strategy, you're still going to need an author platform. The good news is that you can acquire skills, they can be learned. By definition, they're not something intrinsic. And when you don't have the time or the energy or the inclination to acquire a skill, you can partner with somebody who has it. Nobody has all the skills that you could potentially have. That's why we need each other. And that's why one of our cornerstones at the Date Keepers is collaboration across disciplines, across fields. We love to see people partner with people from other fields, other worlds of knowledge, other cultures, because you always get more dynamic outputs when you bring people together who have completely different backgrounds and completely different areas of expertise working together on one project trying to make it succeed. I'll give an example. I didn't have anyone when I was a kid. I didn't have anybody to tell stories to. I told them to myself. I would walk in circles around the trailer that my family was living in, and I thought I was making movies, but actually I was just babbling out loud. And I would tell the stories to my plastic dinosaurs, and I would tell the stories to anyone who would listen, really, but I didn't have anyone who would respond, who would form a dialogue with me, because I was very isolated as a kid. And it wasn't until, I had gone through an MFA program, I had credentials, I knew a lot about the technicalities of writing, but it wasn't until Ito and I started collaborating together that I really started to, I'd been in love with writing before, but I fell back in love with writing as a consequence of Ito and I working together. And for those who don't know, we co-author a lot of our work. We collaborate closely, even on the work that is solo authored. And it's that dialogue with another person that makes the work dynamic. Sometimes I will be losing interest in a story and she'll revitalize my interest in it just by making an offhand comment. Sometimes we'll talk through an issue that we're having and come up with a solution that neither one of us could have come up with independently. So there's, even when you're just talking about the drafting process or the brainstorming process, I can't speak highly enough of the power of dialogue, the power of orality, the power of collaboration as a foundation for any kind of storytelling.
Yeah, isolation is not good, but also there's good side to it. For example, when I was a kid, I didn't have anyone. But the good side of that, I would say, was that I told stories to animals and rocks and trees and everything I found, everything really that was around me, that was listening, or I guess just there. And they were not judging me. They were listening, I think, not sure. But they didn't respond, so I think they were maybe recording, but no one can access.
They had their
that.
little microphones out,
I think, but no one can access that, so I'm safe, I'm good. But I told them things that I don't think I would have told any human being.
That's a good point. There's a dynamic interplay between solitude and dialogue, and it's often tricky to get the right balance. I think, especially in the 21st century, so many of us find ourselves isolated and alone, and that can, in a sense, be very stifling. But so can being in a room full of people who don't care what you have to say, who don't understand you, or maybe you're having a great time with them, but it doesn't help the creative process happen when you're out partying or having fun. So you do have to have a balance in life between social interactions and collaborative interactions and solitude, and it's tricky. I think most of us have a very difficult time finding that mark. That would be one thing I would advise, is if you're serious about your creative process and your creative practice, work on cultivating a productive and healthy balance between collaboration or social interaction on the one hand and solitude on the other, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to create and do it sustainably.
So now you have decided to write a book. Well, there are steps that you need to take to do that. It's not that, you just decide and then the book writes itself.
If only.
There's a process, there are steps, and you have to have an outline as a first step.
Yeah, I mean, most people work with outlines. Some people might write well without one, but generally what happens if you don't have an outline is you just end up dumping a lot of content on the page, and you waste a lot of time because you don't really know what you're writing. Sometimes I've advised students when I was teaching writing, to make reverse outlines after they've already written a draft, but I think that works best for short form content. So if you're writing a book, you're really going to be investing a lot of time and energy in that project. It helps to create the outline so that you can first and foremost see what it's going to look like before you begin writing. That's very motivating. It gives you a sense that the book already exists in some sense, in some dimension. Whenever you start to feel that the project maybe is not going where you want it to go, you can return to that outline and use it to get you back on course. Also, creating the outline can help you clarify your goals for the book. What do you want to achieve with it, and how and why? It can help you clarify the themes that you want to address in the book. If you are free writing and you don't have any outline or structure, you can easily find yourself writing about scenes or events or memories that may be interesting in their own right, but don't actually belong in that book, or don't deserve the amount of attention that they're getting in that manuscript, because they don't contribute to a conversation about the themes that form the backbone of that particular manuscript.
It's basically visualizing your book. It's like the outline is like the book is ready and you are looking at it. It helps you, like Makaya mentioned, know your themes. It helps you understand why your themes are connected or what connects them. And it's the foundation for your book. The outline will help you later. You will find it helpful when you're writing your proposal. That's something we will be talking about in another episode. It will help you organize your chapters. And more than that, it's as I said, the foundation of your book.
I mean, it will literally help you know what your book is about. I always tell people, when you are deciding where to begin and end your narrative, whether it's short or long form content, you are deciding what that narrative means. Because when you choose the beginning point, you are choosing the moment in a character's life, and you can be the character, this can be nonfiction, when we first see that character, the state in which we first encounter them. When you end at a certain point, you're choosing the moment at which the narrative's final meaning is determined. Is this a comedy or is it tragedy? The definition for a comedy is a narrative that ends in marriage. Tragedy is a narrative that ends in death or downfall. So you are actually making key decisions about the significance of your project just by creating that outline. And outlines, of course, they can change. You can rewrite an outline once you are partway through your book, if you want to take the whole thing in a different direction. If you finish the product and it doesn't look anything like your original outline, you can create a new outline, what I call a reverse outline, and you can sit back and look at the new shape that the book has taken on and decide whether you like that, whether it makes sense. But it still is a very helpful tool to have in your toolkit. And for most, if not all writers, it is the first step that you're going to want to take before you start writing or even taking notes for your project.
It also can serve as your timeline. For example, if in your outline you have 12 chapters and you decide that you are going to spend a year writing your book, then you will be drafting a chapter per month. For example, you can draft the first chapter in the month of January and so on.
Yeah, and that's another thing you probably will want to do is create a writing routine, and this will look different for everybody. Some writers say you have to write 5 pages a day or you're not a writer. Others have lives and they can't write 5 pages every day. You probably will have to make some sacrifices somewhere in your life if you're going to write a book because it's an undertaking. So it's very helpful to know from the outset what is going to be realistic for you. Are you going to be able to write 1 hour a day? Are you going to be able to write 1 hour a week? Are you going to be able to devote 48 hours every week to this project? And if so, when are you going to do that? Another thing to take into consideration is not everyone is creative all the time. Even people who are highly creative individuals, there are certain times of day when they're more likely to be creative. There are certain events or rituals that can help them access that creative mode or that might shut them down. For me, for instance, if I wake up and something distracts me early in the morning, actually both of us are like this, we just wake up at different times, but if something distracts us before we can get into the creative mode, it's very difficult to get back into that mode. We both are most creative early in our days. Other people work at night and work very well at night. So make sure that you're not just setting aside time to work on your project, but that you're setting aside time when you can work on your project. And that means knowing
the best time when you are actually able, when you're creative, when you are more fresh. And fresh doesn't mean you just woke up, again, because some people can work during the day on other projects and then be creative at night or later in the day.
And you have to know yourself. You have to know yourself. And if you haven't spent much time in the creative arts before, you probably want to spend some time getting to know what your creative process is like before you try to build a hard and fast routine. Your routine should be flexible to some degree because life happens. You can never anticipate every possible interference. But the worst thing to do to yourself is to try to force yourself to adhere to a writing routine that is actually detrimental to your process. So know yourself, know what your writing routine should be. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Don't take a bite of the wrong thing. And
at the wrong time.
At the wrong time. And don't try to force yourself to meet some arbitrary standard of how long you think it should take to write a book. People write books at different paces. Some people might write... some people are very fast writers. The writer Stephen Graham Jones, for instance, he evidently writes 2 books every year, and they're usually quite good. Others,
yeah, it also depends on your life. If you're a full-time writer, it's more likely that you would write more than someone who has, a full-time or part-time job or kids or other life things. So it really depends on you.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing is not how many books you write, but how good they are. And especially with all of us being so overwhelmed with content. There's so much content out there, and we're all selective. I think we're all getting more selective just as a matter of survival. We're choosing and we're picking and choosing what to spend our time on. So if this goes for readers, but it also goes for us as creators, we need to use our time wisely. We need to use our time well. And if you have the choice between writing 12 mediocre books or one really stunning book, write the stunning book. The other thing to keep in mind is, I mentioned that we all make sacrifices to make our creative process viable. Some people sacrifice their health. Some people sacrifice time with their families. I wouldn't recommend those types of sacrifices. The author Yi-Yoon Lee, for example, has written quite poignantly about how for many years she slept very, very little because she was raising children, she was working full time, and she would write all night. And her books are phenomenal. But I don't know if it was worth the cost to her, the personal cost, because she suffers from severe depression. I think she's written about having suffered from depression even before that stint in her life. But nonetheless, it can be very detrimental to your health to do that. So if at all possible, try to build a writing routine that is compatible with the other priorities that you have in your life. If you're sacrificing frivolity or trivial things, that's one thing, but don't sacrifice your health, don't sacrifice your family.
Well, that's actually a good point because if you just want to write a memoir and you don't want to be a writer, but you love what you're doing, you love your current job, but you want to share your story with the world, and you are busy, you don't have the time, you work 8 hours a day, you have family that's, you need to spend the weekend and your free time with your family. There are other ways to write your story. That's where ghostwriters come in.
You are still probably going to commit time and energy to writing your book, even if you're working with a ghostwriter, because you are the ultimate source of that material. You need to be available to the ghostwriter to give them the material, to give them interviews. You need to make sure that you're working with someone with whom you're compatible. So you're going to probably want to schedule interviews with a few ghostwriters and see who you work best with. So it doesn't mean it's not an entirely hands-off process, especially if it's a memoir. There's a relationship at work there, and you need to be fully invested in that relationship. That said, it can save you a lot of time that you can then devote to other things that are priorities in your life.
And again, especially if you just want to write one book, that memoir, your life story, or how you started your business, or the things that you've accomplished, and you want to share what you've learned with the world. You want people, specifically your readers, to benefit from what you have to share. And if it's a one-time thing, you don't really have to become a full-time writer or a writer spending a lot of hours just sitting and typing and editing and retyping. You can write it and you can have someone provide an extensive developmental editing. But this is just the beginning. In the upcoming episodes, we will be discussing more about editing and book coaching, and if you need one and how to get one. But yeah, there's a lot into writing a book, not just outline or hiring a ghostwriter or making the time for it.
Yeah, those are the first steps. That's if we're building a house, we've now laid the foundation, but we've still got to order the lumber, find the roofers, etc., find the windows that we like, all that. But that is why we put this podcast together. We will be talking about those topics in future episodes. So until then, thank you so much for joining us.
This is Let's Have Renaissance with the Daykeepers. I am your host, Ito Otini.
And your co-host, Makaya Otini.
Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Enjoy your day.